Greetings, friends. Welcome again to my game room. I may have mentioned before that I do workshops, game workshops, and work with scouts to play games and design games and so on for their merit badges. Anytime there's a festival that's looking for something to do with kids that occupy their time a little bit, that's a good place for a game workshop. We develop a whole bunch of interesting ideas as we go through these exercises. And I present a challenge to use what you can find or use what you have in your house, in your junk drawer or whatever it might be, and see if you can devise a game. So we come up with a lot of interesting ideas based on what we have at hand. And I put forth the challenge that we start out with a deck of cards. But let's not use the deck of cards as a deck of cards. Let's do something else with the cards and with the values that they have on the faces. And let's use dice. But let's not just use dice as a roll and move mechanism or who has the highest value kind of mechanism, but let's use them in some different way. And also, let's be sure that the players have some choices to make while they play the game. How do I use those dice, or how do I react to the card faces and that kind of stuff. And then we'll just use some random tokens as playing pieces. And here today I have a few random tokens from my collection. Here's Mr. Spock and Yoda and Abraham Lincoln. A very likely choice of competitors, I think. And so the game we came up with we called Speedway 54. 54 cards, and it was a race game, as you can well imagine. And let the race commence. After some testing, we found it best to start with a track of randomly laid out cards to begin with. This track will grow as the game progresses. Each player on their turn will add a card to the track, drawn randomly from the draw deck, and then roll the dice. After the dice are rolled, they do one of the following things. 1. Choose to move their token forward by one of the dice and backward by the other. This can also be described as subtracting one die result from the other to move. This could be a negative number, and there are reasons to do this. The next option, which is to add the two dice together and move 6 spaces. Now the other option, where the cards come into play, is to be able to move the number that's on the card you're sitting on at the beginning of your turn. Because we're using a standard deck of poker cards, we have 13 different types of spaces, numbered 1 through 10, plus the 3 face cards. A number card is just a number card. If the player chooses option 3 on their turn to move based on the number of the card that they are standing upon, then they just move that many spaces on the track. If they're starting from a jack, they may choose to ignore the die roll and instead to jump to the next face card on the track, that is, to another jack, a king, or a queen. Remember this by jumping jack, which becomes a common comment when this happens. So if you're starting your turn on a jack, you can jump to the next face card on the track. We never decided whether jokers should be considered face cards in this rule. I vote yes. Kings, queens, and jokers don't have any numeric value for movement. The player is forced to use the die roll for their movement. But if that player's in last place, they can use a king or queen as a jumping jack. So this is a reason to move backwards sometimes. To get to a face card in last place, that can result in a net gain in position. So the first player to move on to or past the 54th card in the track wins the race. You probably just noticed that the end of the racetrack is just 5 cards away at this point. What happens if you roll more than 5? Or if you're on a card that's numbered more than 5 at the start of your turn? Well, you have 3 choices of movement on each turn. When you roll those dice, you may move backwards because no other choice can be used. Or after you place that new card at the end of the track, a new option might become available. Or you may just pass your turn and stay put, waiting for a better opportunity ahead. Much of the game is choosing the start space for your next turn, not necessarily being in the lead position all the time. Remember Mr. Lincoln being way behind a few turns ago. One more rule related to this. With 2 players, each adds 2 cards to the ends of the track on each turn. There is math behind that. With 2 players placing 2 cards, or 3 and 4 placing 1 card, you end up with a full game that's somewhere between 12 and 15 turns, generally speaking, before the track is completed. One, add a card to the track. 2, roll the dice. 3, choose how you want to use your turn. You can move forth and back by the dice, you can move forward by the dice, or you can ignore the dice and move by the card. It's kind of a fun little race game. So there's a freebie for you. Grab a deck of cards, grab a couple of dice, whatever token you want to use for your piece. Little race cars probably are the most logical. And play Speedway 54. So whether you play Speedway 54 or you play any other game, I want you to remember to be sure and play every day.